Pope Leo XIV spent his first full day on the job presiding over Friday Mass at the Sistine Chapel. He addressed the cardinals in attendance briefly in his native English. On Sunday, Pope Leo XIV will lead a prayer from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. California Democratic Congresswoman and Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi joins me now. Speaker Emerita, always great to see you. Your reaction yesterday when you heard what struck many as surprising news. Pope Leo XIV, based in Chicago, a kind of American but also Pan-American Pope, spent a lot of time in Peru. Your overall reaction?
Excitement, joy, love, gratitude. So happy that a Pope was chosen quite quickly, showing the unity of the conclave to choose this Pope. Yes, he's an American, but he's also global, you know, having spent so much time in Peru, as well as spending time in the Vatican. So he brings a global perspective to it all. But I was most excited when I heard his name, Leo XIV, Pope Leo XIV. Pope Leo XIII is one of my favorite popes. He was from at the turn of the century, the 1800s into 1903. And Pope Leo XIII wrote an encyclical called Rerum Novarum, of new things. And he wrote about workers' rights. He worked about the rights of workers to unionize, to have fair wages and working conditions. He talked about the poor and ministering to their needs. So when he chose a pope that hasn't been pope for like 125 years, when he chose his name, I thought he would be choosing his path of justice and peace.
Do you think, Madam Speaker Emerita, that this selection will have a particular and important political resonance in our country, considering the tenor of the conversation about the issues you just addressed and also migration with the Trump administration?
Well, I certainly hope so. I worship at the shrine of Pope Francis. It was such an inspiration to all of us. The approach that Pope Leo XIV will take will be his own approach in the tradition of Francis in terms of ministering to the needs of the poor and respecting migration and what that means to a country and the rest. And we'll just see how he goes forward. But I would hope that the Catholics in America, as you know, there's some division among us, would be receptive to the message of Leo XIV.
Speaking of that, there were times before he was Pope, when he was Cardinal Prevost, he amplified those who took issue with Vice President J.D. Vance's assertion that there is naturally within Christianity generally, and Catholicism specifically, what he calls a hierarchy of love. Meaning it starts closest to your family, it radiates outward, and if you're not a citizen and if you're a migrant, you might understandably, according to the vice president, receive less love. How do you evaluate the vice president's orientation to that?
Well, it was interesting to see what His Holiness, before he was His Holiness, said about that. I thought you were going to quote him on that score, that Jesus did not rank people in terms of their worthiness of love. And I do think that people need some guidance in this. Many of us, many Catholics, I don't speak for all of them, that's for sure, but the Gospel of Matthew is our guide. When I was when people go to heaven, they face their Maker. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was homeless, you accommodated me. Everything. When I was in prison, you visited me. The list goes on about how we all have a responsibility to each other. And in the Gospel of Matthew, it says, when you did this for the least of my brethren, you did it for me. It also says, when you did not do this for the least of my brethren, you did not do this for me. So let's get back to the Gospel as Catholics and the mission of the Catholic Church. I think that the statements that President Trump and all of the presidents, Biden, Obama, etc., have made, as well as the vice president, have been very welcoming so far to Pope Leo XIII.
Couple things happened this week, Speaker Emerita. The Trump administration put out its so-called skinny budget, 23% projected cut in non-defense discretionary spending. You know the appropriations process well. You know where the votes are. Do you think there is any chance at all, even a Republican-led Congress, would go that far?
I certainly would hope not, because this is really, when they talk about making cuts, as you suggested, and they, in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in our country predominantly, it's not right. And I've always said whatever we do inside in our maneuvering is important, but the outside mobilization is most important, and people have to speak up. That they would go to like $800 billion to cut in Medicaid is practically sinful. But people have to speak up, and in order to speak up, they have to know. And that's what we're doing, is to make sure the Republican members of Congress are informed by their constituents about their concern, about what it means for children, what it means for seniors who need long-term care, what it means for our veterans and those with disabilities, for what they need. In order what? To give a tax cut to the richest people in America? This is a fight. A budget should be a statement of our values, what is important to us as a country should be reflected there, not as a engineered vehicle to give tax cuts to the high end at the expense of those who needed just to be given a chance, and really not using any scale that the vice president used to say how unworthy people are the further they are away from your family.
Speaking of those at the wealthiest end of the income spectrum, Speaker Emerita Pelosi, on social media this morning, President Trump said he was open to raising taxes on those making above $2.5 million. There's even some indications from the Trump White House they might be open to taxing carried interest, which is a long-running issue, both at the high end of the spectrum. Do you believe that's going to be what happens? Do you believe that's a promise the president intends to pursue?
No, what did he say? He was going to waive giving tax breaks to people making over $2.5 million. Well, that's a pretty high end. That's a pretty high end. But what they say and what they do have been different things. Let's just see where they go. But I'll tell you this, they go down this path with this skinny budget. It's not a skinny budget. It's an emaciated budget if you're middle class in our country, because many of these benefits are middle. They're not even benefits. They're what people put money into themselves over time as they worked. And now they're going to be deprived of that to give a tax cut to the high end. So I don't. They may be feeling the pain. That's why they are. They never feared middle class people and the rest. But now they may be feeling the pain, and that's why they're making these statements. The most outrageous statement, since you're quoting the president, was yesterday when the press asked him. They said to him, dock workers and truck drivers are losing their jobs because of what's happening at the wharfs, of products not coming in, because of the threat of tariffs and the rest. And the president said, that's good. They're losing their jobs, and truck drivers and as was referenced, truck drivers and dock workers, because if more goods were coming in and we're losing money on trade, then we're not losing money, even though they're losing their jobs. How could he even be thinking in such a way? It isn't even logical, much less values-based.
Speaking of trade, Speaker Emerita Pelosi, as you well know, this White House name-checks you frequently, saying President Trump is the first, their words, courageous president to take on China, quoting your long advocacy to be more aggressive with China, not just on human rights, but on trade issues. Is the Trump administration, I know they answer this, but I want you to put it in your own words, doing what you long advocated for?
No, I think that we have concerns with China, trade-wise, economically, values-wise, of course, that have a horrible genocide to the Uyghurs in China, oppression of democracy in Hong Kong, elimination of a culture in Tibet. That's that. Economically, not allowing, being fair about our products coming into their market, and security-wise, because they have, over time, transferred technologies that are useful for weapons of mass destruction. So we've had problems in every area with China. And what we could have done is joined with the European Union as the biggest market in the world, negotiated with them. Instead, we taxed, when he was president the first time, we put tariffs on the European Union and missed the opportunity to join together to do something. So, yes, we need to have better policy that is values-based and promotes our commerce into China instead of just allowing them total access to our markets, and again to make the world a safer place instead of having them sending weapons to Ukraine and understanding how dangerous that is. But there are ways to do it, and I think the president has not done it the best possible, even an effective way. Has not done it in an effective way. But I have had problems with Democratic and Republican presidents in terms of their attitude toward China.
Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita, always a pleasure. Thank you.
But, one more thing.
Sure.
I see that he fired the Librarian of Congress.
Carla Hayden, I want to ask you about that.
She is so superb, so excellent, so respected in the library community around the country. She was the librarian at Enoch Crabtree Library in Baltimore, which I lived at when I was a little girl. But the thing is, my first civic responsibility, I was appointed by Joe Alioto to be a library commissioner, and I took that very seriously. So I understand Carla Hayden and her excellence. This is shameful.
I'm glad you added that. Speaker Pelosi, Speaker Emerita Pelosi, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.